The KfW Westarkade in Frankfurt, Germany is the Council's Best Tall Building winner for 2011. It is one of the most energy efficient buildings in the world, and with us are the building's owner, Axel Hinterthan, who's the director of the KfW Bankengruppe, and Matthias Sauerbruch and Louisa Hutton, who are with the Sauerbruch Hutton architectural firm of Berlin, the building's designers, and welcome to Chicago. We're going to launch into our experts panel questions first about some topics in tall buildings today. The world's next tallest building, which is the kilometer-high Kingdom Tower in Jeddah, Saudi Arabia, was announced in August of this year. And what do you think is the single biggest limiting factor that would prevent us from creating a building that's a mile tall, a mile high?
I frankly think there isn't, actually. I think there's the challenge, and there's going to be always the desire to build higher and higher. And I think, you know, the way the mind and the imagination works, I mean, engineers and architects and clients will find ways to build taller and taller. Whether this makes sense or not is another question, but I mean, I think it will always happen.
The tall building, the super tall building, doesn't seem to mesh well with German sensibility sometimes because there are no super tall buildings in Germany. Commerzbank, of course, is the tallest, but will we ever see a tall building of that magnitude in Germany?
Well, I mean, I think the contexts are very different. You have to imagine that basically Germany is a relatively dense country. It's more or less urbanized. There are, of course, areas of countryside and so on, but it's all very well developed, and there's a lot of infrastructure and so on and so forth. And there's no site that has been untouched, so to say. So when you build in Germany, as in most of Western Europe, you're building within a kind of built environment, within a context in a way which, of course, traditionally has always been low-rise, and the church steeple maybe being the tallest building in the village or town or whatever, and so there's no context that would suggest super tall buildings to be necessary. In addition, I mean, the kind of land values aren't such as, say, for example, in Hong Kong or Shanghai or somewhere like that, where you would say this kind of density is absolutely necessary, that there's an obvious reason to build super tall buildings. It would, if anything, more a kind of question of engineering ambition, I would have thought, of kind of wanting to be the tallest or wanting to be the best.
Yes, I would just add to that I was about to say I think the German engineering schools and the ambition of the architects together, I think it would be their drive to do something like this, but I think probably not located in Germany, located somewhere else, but exporting the German expertise in construction and technology.
Can tall buildings ever become truly carbon neutral? I know that's a goal someday, and Germany has done a lot of work in sustainability. Is that a goal that is reachable?
I mean, I don't think so, actually. I mean, I think if you want to build a building, you have to use materials, you have to use processes, you have to basically expend energy and carbon dioxide. I'm sorry, all you can do is obviously compensate. And one could imagine a building that is making use of renewable energies, so therefore compensating possibly for fossil fuel that would be used to run the building, or even possibly if there's production in excess of consumption, there might be a contribution to the grid. That's theoretically possible. But I also think one has to look at the tall building in a slightly different context, in that it's obviously part of a larger system, i.e. the city. And if you look at the carbon footprint of cities, I think tall buildings can make a big contribution because they create density, they create mixity, they create conditions which will lead to possibly, or can lead to better, to carbon efficient lifestyles, more than small buildings that are spreading out into the countryside, covering ground, creating distances, you know, making mobility and traffic and other infrastructures necessary.
No, it's fine.
Our third question is, this has been the 10th anniversary of 9/11, and are tall buildings today, buildings in general, safer from terrorism than they have been? Have we made them as safe as we can? What's changed in the last 10 years?
Do you want to start? No? Well, I mean, they obviously have changed. I mean, the requirements for safety and fire regulations and so on have generally been revised. Also in Europe, I presume it must have been worse in the US, maybe. And whether we've created the ultimate safety is difficult to say. I mean, I would have thought, I would speculate and say probably not. I mean, tall buildings, I mean, that's the nature of tall buildings. Tall buildings present somehow a challenge as well. And, you know, the risk of height is also the excitement of height is part of what a tall building is. So, in a way, to want to make it the safest place there is a contradiction in terms. If you want to be totally safe, you have to be on the ground.
But I would prefer that all the money and literal energy and professional time is actually spent on making the world a better place and not having any terrorists at all. Obviously, I mean, it's sort of, to me, it's yeah, the perverse situation the world is in, quite extraordinary, and I would hope in the generation of our nieces and nephews and their children that this question really disappears. I mean, it's not going to happen in the next 5 years, but I mean, I think in the long-term future, we have to aim for a united world.
As far as the tall buildings that you look at, and I know they're not deeply ingrained in German culture, but when you look at a tall building, not necessarily a super tall, what is the best one out there? What epitomizes the qualities that you like in a high-rise? Which building?
Well, I was recently on a jury for the high-rise award that is actually given by the city of Frankfurt and the DG Bank, I think, in Frankfurt. Frankfurt being the only high-rise city in Germany, if you like, or one that has a kind of significant amount of high-rises. And I strongly advocated for the project that ultimately won the first prize, which is a residential high-rise building in Bangkok by an office from Singapore called WOHA, which is a kind of, if you could describe it as a screen, it's a very tall building which has openings all over the place, and it's basically naturally ventilated. It has terraces on all levels with swimming pools and kind of all the kind of luxuries that you can imagine from almost a single-story house, but it's stacked. So it's in a way, it's the vision of Le Corbusier from 1921 or whenever it was, of the ville radieuse, where you stack individual houses on top of each other, made possible partially through the good climate, the mild climate in Bangkok. You couldn't obviously do this in Europe or the United States, North America. But it's I think, definitely providing a step forward in the question of the sustainable running of buildings, but also the question of density and urban habitat. So I think, for the moment, that would be my favorite.
I'll pass.
Okay. Time to talk about your building, the KfW Westarkade. And I want to talk to the owner here. Axel, what was the vision going in? Because you work for a company that really supports sustainable design. What was your involvement with the building, and how did this vision progress?
I think the vision is to build a prototype building in energy efficiency in high-rise buildings, and this is what we gave money for in the economy, and we want to make a flagship for our bank. Yes.
So this is the flagship project. This is the epitome of energy sustainability for your company.
It is. During the last 10 years, we built several buildings in Frankfurt, and all of these buildings try to be better than the average buildings in Frankfurt or in Germany. and with the KfW Westarkade, we have had a building with below 100 kilowatt per square meter per year, and this is really unique, I think, for a tall building in Germany or in Europe.
The design of the building, the exterior design, you get so many different aspects of it, so many different profiles as you look at the building. How does the building fit in with town, and what was your aim there?
I think the building is perfect fitting in town, because it's a kind of a entry in the city, and it picks up the colors of the traditional materials in Frankfurt, as there is a red sandstone. Yes, I think it fits very good in the city.
For the architects, what was your commission going in? What were you looking to create? And I guess you're balancing the look and the form of the building with the energy efficiency. How did that work? What was that process like?
Well, for us, one of the, Axel Hinterthan described the way that the building is fitting in with the city, and for us it was very important from an urban design point of view that we're really working with not only the colours of the surrounding buildings, but also the form of the site. There are some towers that were built in the late 70s where the CEOs have their offices, but these are set back from the edge of the street. And our site, if we had built a tower that was just a large slab, it would have blocked the views from these offices and the view to them, because they're very well known in Frankfurt, and they're sort of, although they're modest, let's say, in outward architectural appearance, they're very important for the company because they're where this site was started. And so one thing we wanted to do was to create a building form that would allow these views from the street to the towers and vice versa. At the same time, we started working with our engineers in particular to try and develop a form from the building that would work with the wind. And we had an ambition to use wind energy because it is quite windy, not as windy as Chicago, but it's quite windy in Frankfurt. So we saw that as a potential source of driving the natural ventilation. And in fact, we let the geometry of the main body of the building, the tower, be driven by the main wind direction, which is coming from the southwest. So there's a kind of leaf form, if you like, to that part of the building. So that there's a differential in pressure caused by the wind arriving to the one side of the building and then going around the building and coming out the other end. And then we use the fact that the building has a socle, a base, and we use this to integrate the building into the street level and the neighboring buildings, exactly using the height and the colouring. And then in terms of the form of the building, we made, let's say, a development of the form from the low-rise to the high-rise. So it's not just one socle with a tower on top, but it's more of an integrated three-dimensional form. And then beyond that, there are many aspects to do with how the facade was designed in detail, to do with letting the wind in and the wind out again, so you can open the windows and etc. But it was really, I would say the main idea was driven by the environmental considerations of using the wind to naturally ventilate the building. And I think natural ventilation is probably something that happens less in the States, but more, particularly in Germany. So for us, that was a good starting point.
Because Germany has an ample history to draw on in terms of natural circulation and buildings, and of course the Commerzbank Tower in Frankfurt is an example of the way that was applied on very tall high-rises. So there's a lot of precedent there. What other buildings or what other techniques, existing techniques did you look towards, and what's new in here?
Well, what's new in a way, I guess prototypical, is the so-called pressure ring facade, which is, I mean, it's a double facade, and that the idea of the double facade is obviously not new. We've done it before as well, what is new here is that we are opening this double facade, or the outer layer of this double facade, to let wind into between the two layers. And that wind is, I mean, because it's coming through relatively small openings, is more or less pressure-free. We get fresh air into the channel that's surrounding the building, and you can open a window into that channel without any kind of pressure affecting the inside of your office. So in effect, we are neutralizing the effect of the wind on a tall building, which allows you to, independent of the wind conditions, at any moment to ventilate offices through just simple opening of windows. That's, to my knowledge, I think in this particular format has not been realized anywhere else yet, and it was developed together with our advisors, climate engineers, turned solar, who developed the kind of whole routine for control and management and all of that, and that's being put into practice at the very moment as we speak. And I think we have to learn from it and see how it works, how it how it performs.
Axel, the feedback that you're getting from building occupants and the work atmosphere, what are you hearing?
Very positive reaction. People are very happy with that building. They love it. They're very proud of the building because of its energy efficiency, but they still love it because the conditions in the building are very good, and the quality, and yes, people are very satisfied with that.
So you've got several different systems going on in here. You've got radiant heat, I believe, and you've got the pressure ring facade, and you've got 2 or 3 different sustainable systems in here. Was it an issue getting all of those to work together properly? Was there kind of some proportions to which they contribute to the energy efficiency of the building, or how easy was it to balance those systems out?
Well, in essence, I mean, you get all the kind of sort of, what do you call it, sort of the musts of sustainable design. We have very efficient solar protection, which is sitting between again in this pressure ring facade between the 2 layers, so it's wind protected. The offices are not very deep, so they're all very well daylit. I mean, we have a relatively reduced lighting bill. We're using the floor slabs, activated floor slabs, to provide radiant cools and heat in the building, using geothermal, geothermal heat source, and also excess heat from a kind of computer center that is or very near the site, that's constantly producing heat. So I mean, we're trying to do all the right things, if you like, and it's, of course, all of this is controlled by a building management system, which in our experience is always difficult. I mean, you need about, I don't know what, a year or so to really try and kind of make it actually work. But it's also, in this particular building, there's a lot of occupier what do you call it, involvement. I mean, you can basically, as a user, as somebody in an office, you can open the windows, you can turn off heating, you can turn on the ventilation, and so on and so forth. I mean, you can lower your blinds. You basically can create the environment that you feel happiest with. And I think for a German context, certainly that is a kind of great luxury to have.
Can I just add to that? I mean, fairly obvious, but also the way the building looks in the city and the way it feels and looks inside when you come in to the very generous foyer, which relates to the palm garden that's adjoining, so it has a sort of natural feel to it, if you like, very organic shaped spaces. And then when you come up to the floors of the tower, the corridors aren't just straight corridors with no windows at the end, but they have gentle curves, and then you can see out from the corridors themselves to the landscape, and the offices themselves are generous with lots of glass and have tall full height glass windows onto the corridor. So we wanted to create also the spaces within the building that the occupiers feel hopefully happy with and can identify with and learn to love. And then, yes, as Matthias was explaining, that they can use the building just as they desire to create the right atmosphere, but the word atmosphere is a mixture of the scientific conditions, let's say, of the humidity of the air and the amount, the temperature, but it's really how the building feels to the people, which is more difficult to measure. But we're very aware in our architecture that one's creating spaces that are very, or buildings that are, that have particular character and individual identity, let's say.
When you have multiple systems like that contributing, is there an amount of tuning that has to be done?
Oh, definitely. That's what Matthias was saying. It takes about a year or even more in a way for everything to come together.
And that's the building management system that tunes that?
Well, and people, yes. It's a sort of iterative system of the building and its inhabitants getting used to each other, let's say, and learning from each other. Or do you want to expand on that? Yeah.
Yes, I agree, totally agree. It's a process, and all of our buildings are very high developed in the management system, and it takes at least 1 year to balance this out. And it's after this year, it's also challenging in running the buildings for the engineers.
So this is a situation that you've kind of dealt with before in all your sustainable buildings, where there's a little break-in time that way?
Yes, yes, we do. Definitely, we do.
How do you see this, some of the technology here being rolled out to some of your other buildings? Are there applications that can be used elsewhere?
I think so too. You know, it depends how it will run through the next years, but I think so. It's very good for the economy and for other buildings as a prototype. Yes. I think so.
Well, I want to thank all of you for coming by, and welcome to Chicago, and congratulations on your award, the Best Tall Building in Europe for 2011. Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.